Okay. Good. So last time we had discussed some more details about the C programming, especially defining variables, doing if conditions, and then the loops for while and do while. Last time it was kind of a boring lecture to me, and I guess to you as well, because we had a lot of theoretical information. We didn't see a lot of examples to actually implement this information. So this time it's going to be less boring, I hope so, because we are going to write programs that actually use what we have learned last time. Good? Okay, so now, is there any question? Everything is clear? You guys are good? Okay, so let's now start doing some examples, applying what we have taken in the past lecture. And please make sure you have your laptop with you, because at a certain point I'm going to ask you to write something as a quiz, our first quiz. Good? So what is this example? Let's say I'm going to read 10 integers inputted by a user and then output their sum. This is something like, for example, you have like a purchase list or something you have been taking from like a supermarket or a store or so, and then you want to sum things up automatically. It's a very easy program. We want to write this. And as you can see, given that these are 10 integers, what do we need from what we have studied last time? What is the code block or, yeah? Loops, right? We need 4 loops. And he said 4, not while, because now you have a specific number. So again, if you have a specific number of iterations, then what you can do is you can define this. If you have a specific number of iterations, then you can actually use a for loop. As we will see later, if you don't have a specific number of iterations, then maybe while will be the best loop to go. Again, for and while are exchangeable. You can write any program using only for loops or while loops, but some of them will be easier to use based on the use case. In this use case, we have a specific number of iterations, then for is the right way to go. Good? So let's start trying to go ahead and do that. So this is show up. Maybe just make sure. So okay, so let's start. So first of all, I'd like to get an input from the screen, right? And then I'd like to add this to a sum. So I need actually 2 variables here. The integer that I'm going to read from the screen, and then the sum variable itself that I'm going to add it, right? Are these the only 2 variables that I need, or I need something else? I need a third one, which is an integer for the iteration for the full loop, right? Which is your I, right? Your iteration count. So here you can define 3 integers. Again, as we have said last lecture, when defining variables, you can actually define multiple variables if they are the same type in the same line, right? So you can do int I, and then x as your input variable, and then sum, right? And then you can start your loop. So you can say for, and then I equal 0, and then I less than 10, and then I plus plus, right? This is totally equivalent to saying I equal I plus 1, right? Good. So I plus plus. And then you do this. And then this is your iteration. What is the first thing you need to do 10 times? Before scanning, how the user, if you do scan, you will just have, like, as a user, I'm going to have a plain screen. How do I know that I need to input something? Yeah? So you need to bring something to the user, right? To tell him or her, please input something. So basically here you have printf statement. Maybe actually we can just utilize this one. And say, please input an integer. Good. Then now you can do scanf, and then in the scanf takes At least if you are going to read only one integer, now you need two things, right? Do you remember what was that? First, what is the identifier of the type? So now we are going to read from the screen. You can read multiple things. You can read a line, you can read a word, you can read a character, you can read an integer, a floating point number. How to tell the compiler or the C language that you need specifically to actually read an integer? What should I do here? This identifier, right? That tells the language that you actually need an integer here. And then this is going to be stored in the memory location that is pointed out to by the x variable, right? Or basically x will take this input. Any questions so far? Good. So now I'm going to read this in x, and then what should I do? You should update your sum, right? Sum equal sum plus x. There is one mistake that I have done here. Yeah? Would you see this again? So I have to put, sorry, I don't get that. Would you say this again?
I'm wondering, in the for loop, when you go ahead and put I, is that supposed to be a check for equality or an assignment?
Ah, I see what you mean. Okay. Yeah, so this is an assignment. Good, good. It's a good question. Thank you. So basically, what your colleague is saying here is basically in this assignment thing, this should be equal, or equal, right? Should be this an assignment or an equal condition checking, right? So what I'm doing in the for loop is actually initializing my iteration variable to 0. So I intentionally assign 0 to it. The first expression in the for loop takes 3 inputs, 3 expressions, right? Generally. The first one is your initialization. The second one is your checking one, right? So here I'm not checking whether I is 0 or not. I'm actually initializing I to 0, and then I'm checking whether I reaches the 10 iterations or not, right? So the checking is done in the second expression, and I'm actually checking whether I is less than or 10 or not. So the first one is an assignment. It's not an expression check. Thank you. And then here I increment my count. Yep.
The problem is that the sum variable is not equal to 0, so it's going to give you
Great. So I used here sum after defining it, which is good. The compiler will not complain, but I didn't initialize sum, right? So if any variable is actually in the right side of an assignment or an expression, that means you are going to use its value, you're going to read it. But then in the very first iteration, what does sum have as a value? We don't know because we didn't initialize it, right? So I should initialize sum. What I can do here is sum equals 0, or equivalently, what I can do is here sum equals 0, right? Good. Why I don't have this problem with x? Yeah? Yeah, so you are not using x before assigning a value to it, right? So I'm reading x in this expression, which is sum plus x, but actually x is updated here. So it's safe. But as I said, it's a good skill, or it's a good practice to basically just initialize everything. So just x is equal to 0. And you know that I is iteration, so basically I is initialized. Here you can do the same thing, it doesn't really matter. Good. So you are added the sum to x, and then what should I do? This will be done 10 times, and then you should display the sum to the user back again, right? Should I do it inside the loop or outside the loop? What is the difference? What's going to happen? Yeah. Good. Yeah, at the end. So basically, if I do the printf for the sum inside the loop, each time I'm reading something, I'm going to add it to the sum and then display the sum, right? If I do it outside the loop, what's going to happen is after summing up everything, you just display it once. Good? So let's just do it at the end. Printf your sum is, and then this, which is the placeholder for the variable, and then you do sum. Good. Let's try to run this. Hope it runs. So I should input an integer, then 1, 2. Something that doesn't look very good here is actually the input and, like, please input an integer are actually very close to each other. So what I can do is basically please input an integer and then put, okay, I should stop running. And then I can either do this and then tab or space, or I can do a new line, but let's just do the space thing. Just enter 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, then 9, and then 10, and then your sum is 55, and we are done. Good? Good. So now, what I ask you to do is basically, and this is our very first quiz, is to write a program that just does exactly the same thing, but actually only adds up the sum of the odd ones. So you only do the sum if the input is an odd number, and then you display the sum at the end, right? So let's start from now. It's 10:57, and you have, guys, like 10 minutes to do that. Good? What you should do is basically write the program, maybe just in the online GDB, make sure it runs, and then you post it into a Dropbox into Avenue. Good? Basically what we should do here is, we already had our code from the previous example, right? Now, what you need additionally, just thinking it from algorithmic, just plain English thing, you need to check a condition on the number that you enter, right? Previously, we just read everything, and we did sum everything up without checking anything. Now you need to write an additional condition to check your input before summing it up, right? So what should happen here is, at this point, instead of summing everything up here, you added a condition before the sum. So this is an if condition. This is a condition you should write, and you only sum if this condition is true. How would I check if something is odd or not? Basically, if it's mod by 2 is not 0, that means it's odd, right? And this is a condition you should write. So this is basically, this line is the only change you need to make to the program that we have written. So you only write one additional line to the example we just did together, right? I guess, as you can imagine from the first one, is most of the time taken in any program is actually not coding it. It's actually thinking about it, right? Trying to translate it into the syntax and the language that the programming language understands. So we didn't actually change much in the code itself, but it took you some time to try to actually map it down from the plain English problem into what the code does, right? Good. So another thing we can do is to basically, we need now to read integers, but not 10 ones. We need to read integers until the first one that the user inputs, and then output their sum. What does that mean? I'll keep reading integers from the screen. I don't know the number of the inputs that I get, but then when the user inputs 1, I stop, and then I display the sum of whatever I have had before. Good? Now it's different. Previously we had 10 iterations, so we did a for loop. Now we don't have a specific number of iterations, but again we will keep reading inputs from the user. So we need a loop, but it's not a for loop. Now we're going to use the while loop. Why? Because we have a condition rather than a specific number of iterations. Good? Okay. So what we want to do, again, to translate this idea or thought into writing a code, I need to keep reading inputs, integers from the screen, until the user inputs 1, which means you will have a condition. If the input is not 1, what should you do? Do another iteration. Ask the user to input another integer and then do the same thing and the same thing. If the input is 1, now your condition is not true. You are not executing your loop. You are just displaying the total sum. Good? So the way this is written is basically the first logic is the same. Please input an integer. Something that we have done different from the previous program is these 2 lines were actually part of our loop before, right? Now, we actually do this twice. Why do I do that? Because your condition is actually dependent on the value that the user inputs. So you need at least 1 iteration to make sure that the user inputs something, right? To check it. So you need to display or to take 1 input from the user first. I can actually replace this with another thing. This kind of code is actually suitable for another loop type. What is it? Yeah? Do while, right? Because do while, as we said last time, does 1 iteration before even checking the condition, right? So you can actually replace this code with a do while, and it would be less code and like a better, nice looking code. Good. So what we do now is we ask the user to input 1 number, check its condition. If it's not 1, we keep doing the same thing, and then we only break from this loop if the number is 1. If the number is 1, you just go out, and then something you can do here is you just print the sum, right? This makes sense? Any question? So by this we covered examples from if conditions, for loop, while loop, and then we said you can replace this with do while. Maybe you can try this at home and see how it works, whether it gives you the same result. And by this we are done with our lecture today.